Hi everyone, and welcome to our first week of muscles. So this week we are primarily focused on the head, neck, and trunk muscles. And what I'm going to do in this lab lecture video is kind of just talk to you about where to find them, some similarities in terms of like locations, what the muscles' names are trying to tell us, and a lot of this stuff you're going to hear again this week in lecture. We go through the entire muscular system in lecture with a focus on compartments, recognizing patterns, and things like that. So let's get started. Now, one of the first things we need to understand for lab is what are the things we need to know about the muscles? Well, obviously you need to know where they are. You have to be able to point out all about 100 muscles that we have in our packet. You also need to tell me what do they do? And we'll talk a lot more about this in lab as well, but some muscles do one thing, some muscles do two things, and some muscles do three things, so that's more rare. So just like what we did with tissues, you need to know if there is more than one thing that this muscle does, you need to know at least two, okay? How muscles perform their actions is they shorten, like we talked about in chapter 10 in lecture, and they are going to pull on a bone. So the two bony attachment sites that muscles have are the origin and the insertion. The origin is the bony landmark, one of the ones we learned in our last unit, that the muscle attaches to that when it contracts, it usually does not move. Okay, I say usually because there's going to be a couple of places where you'll see, wait, that's the origin of the muscle, but it's moving. So again, everything has an exception. But for most of our muscles, the origin is going to be the part that does not move, and the insertion, if we come down here, we'll use our bicep, the insertion is going to be the point that does move. So your biceps brachii originates up here in the shoulder joint. It crosses the elbow joint, inserts on that radial tuberosity, and creates elbow flexion. Now, one thing you're going to notice for a lot of especially our limb muscles, origins are proximal. Insertions are distal. It's very, very common. The insertion moves towards the origin. Now, are we learning every origin and insertion? No. It's going to feel like it, but we're not. Basically, if we learn the bony landmark or something near it, you're going to need to know that it's an attachment site. All of that is in your packet. So again, you're going to get a pretty thick packet this week. In class, it's also online. It's thicker because it not only lists out the muscles, their actions, origins, insertions, if you need to know them, but it also gives you the general location or what that muscle looks like to help you guys find it while you're in the lab room, okay? Each lab has a bunch of supplemental content from model study guides to individual Quizlets. I have Quizlets that will help you with identifications. Quizlets if you just want to work on actions. Quizlet if you just want to work on origins. Quizlet if you just want to work on insertions. So you can use this for practice for lab and lecture. Lecture is more of a caveat because as you'll see with lecture, we are learning some of the same muscles, but not to the same degree. So it would be helpful maybe if you wanted to go through the ID Quizlets just so you can remember where some of the muscles are, but it's not going to be as important for lecture as it will be for lab. As usual, I do have a practice exam available. Take that with a grain of salt though, because some of the muscles that are on it, we don't learn anymore. I don't have every single muscle on there, but I still encourage students to utilize it because it will give you an idea of how I pin the muscle models and how I ask the questions. It doesn't have anything from the anatomage or anything like that, but it's still a pretty good way of practicing. And we will also have some practice exams for the anatomage during our final week of this unit, okay? So again, this week is head, neck, trunk. So our facial muscles, the majority of the muscles we're learning on the head are going to be involved in facial expression. So they're going to give you all of those emotive faces that you see. Now, again, the insertion is the thing that moves when a muscle contracts. So in the case of most of our facial and cranial muscles, the thing that's moving is the skin. I don't make students learn this because it's rather redundant for me to say, what's the insertion of the frontalis? What's the insertion of the depressor angulioris? It just kind of clogs up your brain. But just understand that most of them are connecting to the skin, not a joint. We do have some that are touching bone to bone, like your temporalis, your masseter muscles, things that are moving the mandible. But other than that, it's pretty much skin. One of the cool things about a lot of our facial muscles is they tell you where they are or what they do. So we have our frontalis muscle here is on the frontal bone. The depressor, so it's going to pull down. Anguli, the angle, oris, mouth, is this little triangular muscle right here, pulls down the corner of your mouth. Levator, elevates. Labii, lip superioris, it's going to pull the upper lip up. So when you get the reason I'm saying this is when students often get this packet, it's quite overwhelming. You need to take a breath and really reread what the muscle is telling you. There's going to be a hint about something in that name, where it is, what it does, or how it attaches, or how it looks. All of these are really helpful tricks as you guys are getting these things down. Now the neck muscles, we have anterior neck muscles and we have posterior neck muscles. Most of what we're learning is going to be here in the anterior neck group. There is a big flat sheet-like muscle that we'll learn about in lecture. We don't actually learn that in lab because if we see that, I can't see anything else underneath it. So all of our models have that muscle, the platysma, removed. So all we see are a bunch of muscles that are connecting to the hyoid bone and one or two that are connecting to like the head and the rib cage. Most of the muscles here in the neck are for manipulating the hyoid bone, and that is to help us with speech and with swallowing. We also have some that will move the mandible, some that are going to assist in breathing, like your scalenes, they're going to attach to ribs 1 and 2, and then we have things like our sternocleidomastoid and the scalenes that are going to help with things like lateral flexion or rotation or flexion of the neck. One thing about flexion, you flex forward, extension is backwards. So if you go forward like this, that's flexion. This is extension, and that works for your arms, that works for your trunk, and that also works for your legs. One thing that we talk about in lecture that's also going to be helpful for you in lab is understanding who is a suprahyoid muscle and who is an infrahyoid muscle. Supra means above, infra means below. The reason this is helpful is because all these darn hyoid muscles look the same and they all sound the same. But if you remember, these ones live above, these ones live below, that will help you with identifications, eliminating options. And it helps you check your answer if I ask you for what does the muscle do. An infrahyoid muscle is coming from the bottom. It can't pull the hyoid up, okay? So those are some critical thinking skills that will help you guys out as you're moving through this content. Now, again, we do have posterior neck muscles, but we don't learn a lot of them. We'll look at like the splenius capitis, but that's pretty much it in terms of like connection to the head. There's a lot of other muscles back there that we are not concerned with in lab. We'll talk a little bit about more in lecture. We do have muscles that are going to be on the back of the neck, but their main job is to either move the scapula or connect to the humerus. So we actually talk about those kind of in two different places when we're talking about the upper limb and when we're talking about the back. So we talk about them in location in this class. We don't divide them based off of you're moving the scapula or you're moving the upper arm. We're just like, where are you located? So if we go back to the front of the body, we have our anterior torso muscles. These are muscles that are going to be divided into two groups that are going to either be on the chest, so it'd be like above the diaphragm, or they're going to be the abdominal muscles. So we're going to first look here at the chest. The superior muscles are going to be things like your pectoralis major, your pectoralis minor. We also have some on the side called your serratus anterior. These are all either going to be connected to the scapula or to the arm. So they're going to be involved in moving the upper limb or the scapula, which are actually two different types of actions. We also have muscles that are found in between the ribs, such as the internal intercostals, which you can see here. They kind of run at this angle towards the sternum, and then we have our external intercostals, which run at this angle towards sort of the side of the chest. They have different functions in the different stages of breathing. And then you have your diaphragm, which is going to pull down and assist, basically run the show when it comes with respiration. If we move down, we look at the inferior muscles of the anterior torso, and this is your abdominal wall. Now, we'll talk about this again more in lecture, but your abdominal wall is multi-layered with fibers running in multiple directions. This provides a lot of movability because the fibers are going in different directions. That's why you can flex your torso, you can do lateral flexion, you can do, rotation is also coming from your back muscles as well, but it provides a lot of stability. So you have your rectus abdominis, which we can see here. Those are your abs. Rectus means straight. And then coming at this angle towards your rectus, that's going to be the external oblique. So the external oblique is going to kind of come at this angle and point towards the pelvis. And then behind that, running at a different angle, internal oblique. External, internal, and then even deeper to that, as you can see, denoted by the number 4, that is going to be the transverse abdominis. So if you've ever taken like a Pilates class or anything like that where they say engage your core, that's what they're trying to have you engage. The transverse abdominis, as well as some of your deeper back muscles, are really involved in the stability of your core. Now again, the posterior muscles, as I alluded to earlier, on the back, we're going to look at some of them today as they relate to moving either the upper limb or moving the scapula. But we'll also look at a lot more next week, with their main job being activating and moving that upper limb. I basically chose the muscles that are primarily acting on the scapula, or they're really large muscles, so trapezius, rhomboids, latissimus dorsi. These are all muscles that are on the back, but they don't actually act on the spine themselves. They're acting on the scapula, or they're acting on the shoulder joint itself. So here is a recap. This is some of the models that you guys will be looking at this week in lab. And we are also, you can ignore this one. I have it out because I know we covered muscle physiology last week, and I like to leave it out for those of you that are still kind of struggling with the anatomy of a skeletal muscle cell, but it's not actually on your exam. So here's kind of our lab timeline for lab this week. Again, we're going to take our bone check-in. That'll take up the first hour or so. Then we're going to just dive into our packet. I'm going to teach you guys, going to run through the ways I'd like you to approach your muscles, things you want to focus on now, things you want to focus on later. And we're going to talk about our goals for this week's lab session. We are going to have some anatomage work where you guys are going to work with Carl as you explore the head, neck, and trunk muscles. And we're also going to have model work. So you guys are going to try to get through as many models as you can. You're not going to be able to get through everything this week in lab because it's in a check-in day. So use open labs this week, next week, or we will have time next week in lab as well for you to kind of catch up on this content. So make sure you guys have read the lab manual, and I'll see you guys in lab. Bye.